Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore's live stream event series. My name is Alex Brubaker. I'm the manager here at the Scholar, and as always, I am live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the bookstore. Whether you're joining us on Crowdcast or Facebook Live or even YouTube Live, thanks so much for tuning in. Welcome to our live stream series where we host authors and speakers, and we keep the conversation going about books we love, even in this weird, strange time that we're living in. Tonight is a special one, because one, it's our first ever collaboration with the Inky Phoenix Book Club. So first, drop what you're doing, go to your phone and follow them on Instagram at the Inky Phoenix. It's great book content. You won't regret it. And two, these are two novels that our staff here at the Scholar absolutely adore, and we've been looking forward to this event for quite some time. Of course, the novels are A Burning by MEGHA MAJUMDAR and Circe, here it is, by Madeline Miller. So if you haven't yet purchased their books, I'd like to encourage you to do so. Purchasing MEGHA and Madeline's books through us helps support the authors, this event series, and the future of the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. Some cool additions that we're adding to orders. We have signed book plates from both authors that will include in every book, and we even have Circe-inspired T-shirts for a limited time. So here's what you got to do: click the green button below on Crowdcast. It's below my face here to purchase your books and T-shirts. If you're on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, simply head to our website at MidtownScholar.com to grab your copies. And while I have you here, I'd also like to go ahead and give just a shameless plug to our event series. If you haven't yet followed us on Crowdcast, click the green follow button in the upper right-hand corner. I think it's over there. Could be over there. And you'll be notified every time we go live with an author. It's a great way to stay plugged in so you don't miss out on any events. And if you get sick of me, you can simply unfollow us at any time. And lastly, we have tickets available to see Colson Whitehead in a couple weeks for a presentation on the Nickel Boys. Head to our website for details. Tune in. It's another one that you really shouldn't miss. Again, MidtownScholar.com. But okay, now on to our program this evening. We are honored to welcome New York Times bestselling authors MEGHA MAJUMDAR and Madeline Miller, hosted by the one and only KATHRYN Budig of the Inky Phoenix Book Club. KATHRYN is an internationally celebrated yoga teacher and the best-selling author of Aim True and the Big Book of Yoga. She graduated from the University of Virginia with a double degree in English and drama, and her yoga classes can be found on Glow. She is a co-host of the podcast Free Cookies with her wife, Kate Fagan. Shout out to Kate, What Made Maddie Run, great book. And she's also the founder of the Inky Phoenix Book Club, which again, you can follow on Instagram at the Inky Phoenix. Also, some cool news that you can look forward to. KATHRYN's debut YA novel is currently out on submission, so keep an eye out for that in the foreseeable future. Hopefully we'll be able to host KATHRYN when it's released. Madeline Miller, of course, was born in Boston and attended Brown University, where she earned her bachelor's and master's in classics. She lives in Narberth, Pennsylvania, with her husband and 2 children. The Song of Achilles was awarded the Orange Prize for Fiction and has been translated into 25 languages. MEGHA MAJUMDAR was born and raised in Kolkata, India. She moved to the United States to attend college at Harvard University, where she was a Traub Scholar, followed by graduate school in social anthropology at Johns Hopkins University. She works as an associate editor at Catapult and lives in New York City. Of course, once again, the books we are here for tonight are Circe and A Burning. Here they are. I won't take up too much of your time heaping praise on these novels, but they're 2 of our favorites, and we're so, so happy MEGHA and Madeline have taken time out of their busy schedules to chat with us. And finally, last thing before I hand it off to KATHRYN, click the Ask a Question button below. Again, it's below my face, below the green button. If you have a question for either author, I can't promise we'll get to all of them, but we'll save some time after the interview to go over your questions. And if you can, please upvote your favorite questions. That's the best way for us to ask the questions that you want answered. So finally, at this time, please join me in welcoming onto the screen KATHRYN, MEGHA, and Madeline.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
And hello. I'm so excited to see both of your faces. This is the future. This is book tour future. Right now. And it's quite cozy that you don't know if I have on pants right now. So obviously, so many people are tuning in, and many of the people tuning in have already read and adore your novels. But let's just assume that we have some new faces here and that they don't know about A Burning, they don't know about Circe. And I would love for you to explain a little bit about what the books are about. But as an author, I know the elevator pitch is one of the hardest things in the world for your book. So if you could give me one sentence that would sum up your book, because just to put you in the hot seat, and then after you give me the one sentence, like just let it rip and go for it. And whoever wants to go first, let's go with Megha, because you have the debut novel.
Okay, sure. So my book is called A Burning, and it's about three people who are chasing big dreams while the society around them makes this dangerous turn toward right-wing nationalism. How's that sentence?
That was really eloquent. Perfect. Yeah, go for it, Madeline.
Okay. Let's see. Witch and artist rejects corrupt society and makes her own power.
Good. And feel free to elaborate both, beyond this one sentence that I have just shoved you into.
I really liked the one sentence, actually.
Okay, that's it. All right. Well, we'll leave the readers being like, ooh, mysterious. What is it all about? So let's start with the concept of structure, because you both have very interesting structures to your books. And Megha, I'd love to start with you, because I had to look this up, actually, because you write in the multi-perspectivity standpoint. And sorry, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and there's a massive storm happening in the background. And you write from the perspective of these three separate characters. And I just wanted to know, how did you settle on the structure of telling the story through these three different perspectives?
I started with three driving questions, which led me to my three characters. One was, I wanted to see how somebody who works really hard, really earnestly, can still be thwarted by the systems that they live within. And what do they do then? So that kind of became my central character, who was a young woman called Giovanni. The second main character is a school teacher who, he feels that he's not really having the kind of vigorous impact on the nation through his work that he might have hoped for. And so he becomes drawn into the workings of this right-wing political party. And he has to decide what he will do, what morals he will surrender. And I wanted to see what proximity to power can do for such a person who is not evil, he's not a villain, but he has to make tough choices. So I wanted to see what such a person would do with a little bit of power. And somebody who moves from the very margins of society, she tries to move to its center by chasing this wild dream of becoming a movie star. And I wanted to see how, even in this oppressive, discriminatory system, people don't give up on their dreams, right? You are still chasing ambitions that you are told you cannot have. So how do you do that? So those are kind of the three characters that I landed upon. And I felt like I could only tell three stories with any depth and nuance and the kind of contradiction that I wanted. But I did despair that I couldn't tell more.
And you have these amazing interludes that you add in the book as well. I would have to go back and count how many you have. And I want to bring it up later because it's quite heavy and I don't want to start with it right at the beginning of our conversation. But all of your chapters are short and punchy, and which is my favorite way to read because it just makes for this page turning experience. And I was wondering if that was part of, and you even have, if you look at the cover of the book, you have a train on the cover of the book, and it's about this bombing, this terrorist act that happens on the train. And so it did have this pacing of like this charging train the entire time. And I was wondering if that was part of your plan or if it just kind of developed that way naturally.
The velocity of the book was so important to me. The project that I set myself from the start was I wanted to see if I could write a book that felt intellectually serious, but also entertaining. And so much of crafting that entertaining aspect I felt was about having. And I have to say that I derived a lot of energy and inspiration from TV shows and, the idea of binge watching a TV show. What is it that a show like that can do, so that you feel like you are so invested in this character. You have to know what happens to them. You know, how do these stories open and close? What does each scene do? So I tried learning from those to
It's so smart. It gave me one of my favorite books of all time, and people can judge or agree in the comment section, is Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it has that same kind of approach where you get the journal entries of all the different characters. And I love that perspective, because it gives you a kind of that, 360 perspective of what a story is, instead of what is often very popular these days is the unreliable narrator in a story. Madeline. So Circe, it reminds me in so many ways of the Odyssey, in the way that it's filled with these beautiful anecdotal Greek classic stories. And you get to learn, you meet all the villains and the heroes, and then your interpretation of all these delicious stories that maybe we just got little amuse-bouches of in the past. And I've heard you also talk about how you purposefully featured Odysseus the exact amount of time in Circe that Circe was featured in the Odyssey. So I want to know about the structure and how you organized it, but I think the bigger question for me is if these parallels are indeed correct, the goal of Odysseus in the Odyssey is to get home to Ithaca. So what is the end goal for Circe?
Absolutely. So I very much did really want there to be parallels between the Odyssey, and I sort of let the Odyssey steep in me, both while I was writing the novel, but also because I have a classics background, it had sort of been steeping for before that even. So I really wanted it to be the story of this journey, of an epic journey. I wanted there to be encounters along the way that we sort of never catch up to again. They happen and then they move on, which felt very realistic to the way life unfolds. I also wanted there to be this longing for home, just like there is in the Odyssey. That feeling of wanting to be home again, and wanting to have your homecoming. The Greek word for homecoming is nostos, and that's where we get the English word nostalgia. It's like the pain of wanting to be home. And so that is what animates the whole Odyssey. And I wanted that to really animate Circe as well, that she is looking for a home, except her home, the home she was born to and grew up in, is this completely toxic, terrifying, violent, and cruel place. It's where, all the gods are, where her family is, where her abusive family is. And so part of what Circe is doing is actually she's sort of going a step beyond Odysseus, which is that she's looking for home, but she also has to invent that home herself. It has to be a found home and a found family, as opposed to heading back to something that you already know is there and waiting for you. So I sort of wanted it to be this journey into the unknown, into, the open horizon, and not, Circe isn't sure necessarily what she's going to find or what she's going to make of that world out there.
That's so interesting. When you said that, it just made me think of how, Odysseus claims that in the Odyssey, his whole plan is about getting home, when in actuality, I don't think that Odysseus was craving home. I think he was craving glory. He was craving what Athena wanted him to do. And then if you look at Circe, she's exiled, and yet she's craving a home that she never had in the first place and trying to create something that doesn't exist, which somehow makes them the perfect yin and yang. I don't want to give away too much, because you need to see and understand how Madeline spun this web of the two characters together. And also, why Circe? Why did you choose to pick her as your heroine?
She was really this character that had been hanging around in my brain since I was 13 years old, and I first read the Odyssey and was completely frustrated by the portrait of her. I found it totally unsatisfactory in my, very opinionated 13-year-old way. And I really was frustrated, not just by Circe. She was sort of the latest example of the way I felt female characters were flattened, constricted, ignored, sidelined, silenced in most of the mythology. Every now and then you'll get a character like Clytemnestra or Antigone but many times characters are really just, so constricted. And so I loved that about her, but I also loved that her story doesn't end in tragedy, which is so rare for women who have power in Greek myth. Most of the time, women who wield power have to be punished for it by the end of their story. They have to be constrained. They have to sort of be put back in their place. And that's not how Cersei's story ends. And I thought, well, how on earth did that happen? It must be the witchcraft.
We all need a little witchcraft in our lives, don't we? So another thing that I noticed, that the fun thing about having both of you on this panel is two very different books. And so my job was like, how can I find this connection between your two stories? And another thing that I noticed between the two of you is this beautiful use of language. And Megha, so you grew up in India and you grew up speaking Bengali.
That's right.
And is it true that the first time you ever came to America was when you came to go to school at Harvard? Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. The only place that I had been outside of India was Thailand until that point. And then I moved to the US to go to college.
And then you went to Harvard? I mean, was that the most intimidating thing in the world? That's amazing. You're all like, here I am.
It was incredibly strange, but also very energizing. The reason that I applied to go to colleges abroad was I felt that in my school in India, it was, I loved my teachers, I loved my friends, but I was very aware in this kind of very teenage perceptive way that you were just talking about, Madeline, of how I wasn't getting the kind of rigorous education that I wanted. It was very much about, read this text, learn it, reproduce it in your exams. And I knew that I wanted in my higher education a chance to learn to think. I wanted to see how people could question books and disagree with them. And I felt that my only way of getting that was to apply to these schools abroad, and somehow I got into Harvard.
Somehow. So this concept of language and cadence in both of your books is very powerful when you read it. And I was curious, Megha, I feel like you captured the essence, and I mean, I've never been to India before, so I can't say directly, but you managed to capture this beautiful cadence and energy of India in the way you wrote. And so I'm curious, as like using English as a language when that wasn't your first language, and then also trying to capture the energy of India, what was that like for you? And was it a struggle, or did you kind of just find your rhythm once you got into it?
When I was a kid, I really struggled with English. I had a very hard time learning English. And I was constantly told that it is the language you need to learn to move up and to succeed later in life. But the thing that flipped it around for me was realizing that even though everything I was reading was true, and Babysitter's Club and picture books where blonde kids go to the beach and eat scones, I realized eventually that English could fit into my life too. It didn't have to be that kind of English, that I could have an English that settles into Indian life and Indian textures. Yeah. And I think to the language. And writing this book in English, I hope that the sentiments and richness and pathos and humor of Bengali, which is my mother tongue, I hope that it comes through, particularly in a couple chapters. I hope that it comes through even though it's written in English. It's definitely, I hope that my English is given depth and richness by my mother tongue.
Especially with the character of Lovely. Your beautiful trans woman, Lovely's language, I felt like I could almost hear the dialect when Lovely was speaking. And those were some of my favorite little punchy chapters that I enjoyed so much. So you did an excellent, beautiful job at capturing that. You happened to get into Harvard. Madeline, also reading Cersei, and many of the people here perhaps love the classics and can happily digest them. For a lot of people, though, if you tell them, hey, do you want to pick up the Iliad or the Odyssey or the Aeneid, they would quake because they feel like they would need a translator to read it. And you did such a beautiful job at keeping that cadence of the classics and your metaphors. I'm very curious about your metaphors because I did feel like I was in the Odyssey, but I was also reading a modern novel at the same time. And it was mind-blowing. And I'm curious how you managed to breach the modern language in such an antiquated way that married them together.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I also want to second what you said about the cadences in A Burning, which are just so gorgeous and beautiful. I love the lovely chapters, and I love the way you develop voices for each of these characters that are so strong and powerful. I just have to say this because I am so in love with this book. But one of the scenes that I love, and I'm going to try and say this without spoilers, but there is a moment where Lovely sort of steps onto the scene and speaks. And after having been it's not one of her chapters, it's someone else's chapter, but she speaks in the chapter. And the reaction I had was as if my friend had just walked into the room. As soon as she had like one line, and I was like, wow, that is really amazing character work that you have done, and incredible language work, is that I knew it was her, and it just, like, I could hear her. So anyway, it's amazing. Thank you.
You are too generous. I can't, yeah. Thank you for everything that you brought to the book and for reading it with so much care. This is such a dream.
But when I know that sometimes classics can have that intimidating factor, particularly the Iliad and the Odyssey. But one of the things about the Iliad and the Odyssey that I really try to sort of say is that, these came out of oral tradition. They were stories that parents told their children, that grandparents told their grandchildren. They were stories that, a bard would deliver in front of an audience who was sitting there listening to it right then, and they would change depending on the night and who the audience was. And so these were not fixed stories that were worshipped. They were living stories that were interacted with by the people hearing them, and everyone was contributing to them. So I know that they've gotten this sort of reputation for being rarefied, untouchable, but that is not their role in the ancient world at all. And so, just remember that they are coming from this place of, these were the stories that everyone was telling, and that they belonged to everyone in the ancient world. And, they were sort of this amazing, they were the earth that everyone was working with and retelling and reshaping. And, this was this common thing that belonged to everyone. So, yeah.
Have you ever thought that you might be the reincarnation of Homer?
That is so kind, except for the fact that I kind of, if I'm going to be totally honest here, I kind of don't think Homer was a person. I kind of feel that,
Bring it home.
that, Homer was the name that the ancients gave to whoever composed this, but I think it was composed by so many voices through so many centuries, and that's why they have such power. But as I was working, you mentioned metaphors, and I love working with metaphors and similes. The ancients love to work with them. I love to work with them. And one of the things that I always want is I really want my metaphors and similes to flow out of the character who is speaking. And so as I was developing Circe's voice, I was trying to think about, what are the references in her life? What are the, you were talking about textures. What are the textures of her life that she's living with? What are the things she sees around her? What are the things that resonate with her most deeply? Because I never want to be kind of reaching for a metaphor or trying to force a simile. I feel like it has to flow out of who the person is. And how they see the world, because it's almost like I see metaphors and similes as like a little bit of like a clue to the person's inner workings. They're very revealing about the person, I think.
That's excellent advice for any writers who are listening to this right now. Megha and I are like taking notes.
Yes, taking notes.
So another theme that I notice is prominent in both of your books is the concept of exile. And Megha, you described The Burning as, a story of three characters chasing big dreams in a society that doesn't serve them, which is just the perfect succinct way of explaining it. And then Circe is a story about a Titan goddess who has also been exiled basically for being herself, for being a woman, for being a witch. Zeus is listening right now. I don't know if anybody can hear that. I think Thor decided to join in too. So I wanted to know, and whoever wants to start first, you can, the role of exile in your stories, but not just physically, but also the concept of emotional exile. Eeny, meeny.
I can go. That's such an interesting question. I don't think I've been asked this about the book yet, but I think you're hitting on a certain kind of alienation. And your question brings me to one of the characters in the book, the school teacher, who I think feels quite alienated from the other teachers who work at his school, certainly from his students who do not respect him and are always trying to get out of gym class. And a lot of the moral choices that he makes, I think, come out of that place of feeling slightly rejected and slightly alienated and removed from the people around him. So I think that question of exile makes me think about actually a kind of jiltedness and a kind of resentment rather than perhaps the more romantic idea of it.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like that character's story, and again, I don't want to give anything away, but in Burning, I felt like that character's story was so, it was so difficult to read, and to walk with him through this sort of slow sinking into, more compromised choices and more compromised choices. And I feel like that what is really at the heart of that was this sense of privilege, is that on some level he sort of had always felt that he belonged at the center. And so being exiled felt like this displacement from something that he was owed. And one of the scenes that I found so powerful in your book is that Giovanni, is that how you say her name? How do you say?
Jivan.
Okay, Giovanni. Oh, Jivan. Okay, there we go. She has this statement where she is able to, and it's amazing witchy energy on you there, KATHRYN. I came into the lightning and the
that artist is behind me too. She's all like,
but she is able to sort of summon up all her energy and confront someone about getting clean water in their apartment building. And her mother says, look, sometimes things do work out for us. And her reaction is not hooray. It's this feeling of, but I thought that's it. That's all we get, is that sometimes when we really work hard, sometimes things occasionally work out for us. And I feel like that just is so beautifully shows the difference between the two of them, with him feeling like he belongs at the center and her, constantly being told that she has no right to that place.
I feel like your beautiful reading of it is helping me return to my own book and open up doors in it. Thank you so much.
It's nice having a professor here, isn't it?
Yes.
Not a professor. But I do think that exile, I think that there is real strength in exile. Sometimes, I think that exile can be a way to make a new life. It can be an opportunity. It's a breaking. It's this huge abruption with your old life, and then you get the chance to remake yourself. And if you have the will to do that, and you find a way to do that, and it can be an opportunity. It's sort of like traumatic growth, that after trauma, you can have sort of, growth that comes out of that. And so that is sort of what I was looking at with Cersei, is this idea that she is exiled and it is traumatic, but actually she finds that being alone is much better for her than being with her family. And so that exile ends up becoming sort of a healing process for her.
Absolutely. There's also the very fun topic of misogyny that plays a role in both of these books. And Megha, you have for anyone who's reading along at home right now, on page 36, and this is obviously earlier on when we see Giovanni in the jail, the women's jail. And, you know, she's basically going through a list of why the women are there, how they got into jail. And, you know, you go on and you read to say, her husband threw acid on her, but somehow she is the one in jail. These things happen when you are a woman. And which I underlined and wrote Cersei next to it when I was reading this. And so there's both this theme, you know, very obvious ones in a burning of what's happening to Giovanni, what's happening to all the women that are in the jail. Lovely as a trans woman with how much she's misunderstood in culture and even the typecasting that's happening before, you know, she starts to make it big, and I don't want to get too much away. And then, you know, obviously within Cersei, there's the misogyny that she experiences with all the sailors who come in and take advantage of her, but also a little bit of internalized as well with how she deals with Scylla and how she deals with, okay, I'm going to see if I can say it. It is right here.
Pacify.
Like, lots of weird letters and dots. So I would just be curious your take on misogyny in both of your books, and, you know, was there an underlying societal message that you were trying to get through to the reader, or is it life that just happens when you're writing a story? And MEGHA always gets to their debut novelist.
I think that's a great question. I think that so much is asking questions around who gets to speak, who gets to star in their own story, who gets to present their narrative with complexity and resist the narrative that is put on them, and who gets to be believed when they do speak. And, you know, these are questions that are so intimately and intricately bound up with what it means to be a woman in this society. And, you know, I think that space of shame that I think a lot of women are very familiar with because society is constantly trying to put it on us, that space of shame where people are told, you cannot have a better life. This is your place in society. This is your role in your family. This is what you are able to do with your life. I think pushing back against that, pushing back the force, you know, and saying, I want something better than that. I am unwilling to accept the narrative that you're putting upon me. That is such a powerful space. So definitely thinking about not just these, you know, big kind of institutional other kinds of struggles, like struggles with the police system and struggles with the justice system, but also thinking about the struggle to move forward in a patriarchy. That is such a big part of this, for sure.
Yes, I love the way you put that. I think that that question of who gets to tell the story, who's constructing the narrative, was something that was very much with me as I was working on Cersei, and who gets to make mistakes and who gets given the benefit of the doubt. And, you know, I think that there's often this feeling that women cannot make any mistakes, you know, that if they're sort of always performing on the high wire when they're out in the public eye. And so I very much wanted Cersei to, first of all, she has to realize that that's a narrative that is affecting her own life, but then she sort of has to realize that actually, oh, it's affecting all the women around me. And I wanted her to really go through that she herself has internalized some of those feelings about, you know, women getting to be complex and why women do things and women in power and how women should behave, that she has also internalized those things. And she sort of has to work through them with her sister and, you know, with Medea, who also shows up, and with Scylla, and that she makes some real mistakes along the way. And that part of her coming to terms with this world is that the whole structure is a problem. It isn't just, you know, about saving herself. It's that the whole thing is a problem. I wanted in particular to sort of show ways that, you know, just little ways where one of the scenes that I think I really was very difficult to write, actually, was the scene where Cersei, men have come to her island and she invites them into her house. She has this reaction to help them when she sees them. She invites them into her house, and then all of a sudden she has this feeling where she realizes she is alone in the room with 30 men she doesn't know. And there's this feeling in the air that she suddenly gets. And I wanted to sort of have, you know, that's a very particular feeling that I think, unfortunately, many women have had in their life, where all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I'm, you know, and I think it's that feeling of, I am in danger here, possibly. So bringing out those moments and letting them live. You know, I didn't think about that moment ahead of time. It was something that I found as I was writing it, but I always wanted to be sort of thinking about her experience as a woman in this world that was incredibly hostile to women.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a very chilling chapter, or scene, rather, when I was reading it. Let's take the power back from that topic. And Megha, this is going to apply to you as well. But Cersei has an all-star cast of lovers in her book. She, obviously, we have Odysseus. We all know about that. She has a little bound with Daedalus, who is the famous father of Icarus and the famous builder. And then also we have this stuff going on with Hermes. So my question for both of you is, if you could have a wild tryst with a god or goddess, and it doesn't have to be Greek, you can choose from any mythology, I want to know, who would it be and why?
Wow, that's a tough question.
And anyone in the comment section, you can drop like who your god or goddess would be and why. Too.
Yeah. Wow. Does it have to be a god or goddess, or can it be any mythological figure?
I'm down with any mythological. If you're going to say the Minotaur.
Wow. All right. I mean, I feel like I can't say Cersei because, you know, that almost feels incestuous, given that I lived with her for 7 years. So I feel like
God would do, so that's okay.
So maybe I'll say Calypso, who's the other sort of nymph in the Odyssey, who actually pushes back against the double standard that goddesses are held to as opposed to gods. So I feel like there's a little proto-feminism there with Calypso. She also has kind of a magical island. Seems like things are pretty good. She doesn't have lions. I feel like that's a big step down from Cersei.
That's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Respect. That's a valid choice. Would you like to join in on this?
I think I might say, you know, the goddess that you made me think of is the goddess of books and learning called Saraswati. Mm-hmm. And you just reminded me of these, you know, the festival that we had, which in Bengali we call Saraswati Pujo. And it was a festival that was all about revering books. And one of the super early on as a kid was, it was just this superstition where you're not supposed to ever touch your foot to a book. And to this day, I cannot, like, if there is a book on the floor, I have to make sure that I do not touch it or step on it. Or even if I'm stretching out on the couch and there's a book on it, I have to move it before I'm able to do it. So like, of respect for a book, I think feels really close to me.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna have to look at that god. Is it god or goddess?
Goddess.
Okay. And you know, we could always introduce Durga, the Hindu goddess who rides her lion, since you're missing a lion.
That is true.
A little threesome tryst going on. Awesome. So I spoke with both of you before this about, you know, normally in these kind of things, we might have the author read from their book for a little bit, but I thought what might be more interesting, since we have both of you guys, was for you to read like a little favorite passage or snippet from each other's book. So Megha, I know you found a little something that you wanted to share. So since you were my number one. No.
Sure. So while I'm waiting for my hard copy of Circe to arrive, otherwise I would have been holding it up like this whole time.
I got you.
In desperation, I finally dived into a digital copy, and so I'm still early in the book, forgive me, but I already have so many passages that I love, and one that I just wanted to call out and read out today is, I'm just pulling it up. This is on page 44, 45 for me, and I'll just read it out really quickly. It's a short passage. That man, I said, nearly choking, he will die. This is Circe talking to her grandmother. Her stool was oak, draped with softest weavings. The yarn in her fingers was river stone green. She was winding it on her shuttle. Oh, granddaughter, she said, of course he will. He is mortal. That is their lot. Fair, I said, it cannot be. Those are two different things, my grandmother said. I thought that was just gorgeous. And wow, that was the passage that I kept coming back to as I was thinking of this conversation, because I think you can tell that I am so early in the book, but already one of the things that I'm really in love with is Circe's great concern for mortals, this strain of thought that it appears only she has, where she thinks about, well, how are they different from us? And what are their vulnerabilities? And I just found that so beautiful, that thought about how, well, things are not fair, but that is how sometimes they are.
Thank you. That's so kind. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm gonna, I was gonna read a slightly longer section, but I'm worried that it gives something away. So I'm gonna shorten it a little bit, because I don't want to give this away, because it's one of the most beautiful things. But when you come to this passage in a burning, I want you to just extend. Just remember that I wanted to read the whole thing. So one of the things that I loved, I mentioned how much I love the character of Lovely, and I love how invested she is in her art. And I love that she has such a deep gift for transforming into imagining other people's lives and other people's perspectives, which I actually think is one of the gifts of the exile. And so this is her imagining herself into another person as she's acting. And me, from the depths of my heart, I am becoming the mother I am needing to be, even though the child actor will be coming tomorrow and I am only imagining her today. Every wish of motherhood that I am having for all my life, I am pouring into the lines they are giving me. I am dreaming this child into being before my eyes, and I am holding this beloved little person. How real she is, my child. And I felt like that section, which is this amazing moment of triumph for the character, was so powerful. And then the part that I'm not reading that was also so shot through with grief at the same time, what sort of comes after that section. So yeah, thank you.
Oh my God. Did Madeline Miller just read from my book? Did that just happen? Oh my God, thank you so much.
So we're gonna move, I would love to keep doing this, and we're gonna move over to some Q&A from everybody. So if you haven't put a question in, I'm gonna try to get to as many as possible. I'm gonna open this up. I know for sure that a question that I've already seen on the sideline that I have to ask or people will be upset with me. Madeline, what's next? Can we expect another mythological heroine or hero?
Actually, I am thinking about the Tempest. So we have already bonded a little bit, KATHRYN, about theater. And the other thing I do is I direct Shakespeare, and I love working with the Tempest. I actually don't like directing the Tempest, which is, I think, why I've been itching to write about it for 10 years, because it's not a play I enjoy directing. So I think that, although I'm always very superstitious about these things.
And would it be your own interpretation of it, or would you try to like stay pretty classic with embellishments?
I think I would. I think I'm interested in what happens after the action of the Tempest, that the action of the Tempest ends on this sort of strange, triumphant note that isn't triumphant at all.
Right.
You know, Miranda, the daughter of Prospero, is supposed to just sort of seamlessly reintegrate into society as, you know, the heir of Naples and Milan. That seems like that's not going to happen. And also we're left, I mean, most of all, I think the big question mark is what happens to Caliban? That there, you know, it's never said. Does he get left on the island? Does Prospero drag him off? And how does that story resolve? So I feel like the two sort of children of the play, Miranda and Caliban, their futures are left totally up in the air.
I am very excited to read that.
Yes.
Like, yes. Okay, Megha, this one is for you. Although I'm sure this applies to both of you, but Megha, can you talk about what it was like going through the process of having your own book published as someone who works in the industry?
I think it affirmed for me how many people work on a book and how many people bring creativity and thoughtfulness and hours of hard work to a book. I think a lot of that labor is so invisible, but you see it if you work in publishing. And I definitely saw it with, you know, the team at Knopf, who just gave so much to this book. It was really strange, actually, and it continues to be quite strange being on the other side. In many ways, it felt familiar, but in many ways, being the author is just full of surprises. Like the feeling of doing an event like this, you know, where you get to talk to these superstars and, you know, you spend all day kind of waiting for it and you can't eat dinner until it's over, which is true for me. You know, that stuff is so new, like having, even though I'm sitting in my living room and, you know, I've been wearing this dress all day, and but it feels new. It feels surreal in so many ways. I feel like such a newcomer to this, and it's actually quite a source of joy.
Can we expect more novels from you, or do you feel after this experience that you want to step back and take a break, or is this invigorating you and filling your inspiration tank?
This is definitely energizing to me. I'm working very slowly on a second novel, which is very different.
Okay, that's okay. Just leave us hanging. I like that. Okay, Madeline, this is 7 votes, and this is juicy. How did you reconcile the Telemachus who killed the slave women in the Odyssey with the Telemachus who Circe fell in love with? And then they also said, love this book so much, and Song of Achilles.
Oh, thank you. Great question. It was something that I thought a lot about. And I didn't want to be soft pedaling it at all, because I had the obviously I don't have to stick to the material. I could have changed it. I didn't want to change it. I wanted him to have been the person who did that, and I sort of saw that as basically this thing that he does. You know, his father tells him to do it, and he does it. And so in the Odyssey, what happens is Odysseus orders Telemachus, his son, to chop up these 12 slave women who have been, you know, disloyal to Odysseus because they have had sex with the suitors, which of course they're slaves. This is rape, you know. So it's an absolutely shocking and upsetting and deeply disturbing episode. And instead, Telemachus hangs them. And it's something that scholars have really talked a lot about. Why does he change the way he's going to do it instead of attacking them with swords? What does the hanging mean? All of that. So, and people have talked about that a lot and sort of his character. So I definitely know I wanted to keep it in. And I think that what I really saw in that moment is that he has been told his whole life, you know, your father's going to come home and you're going to be your father's heir and he's going to be with you. And the father that comes home to him is, you know, this man who is, has committed so many acts of murder and bloodshed and seen so much violence. I mean, Odysseus is actually an incredibly violent and angry character. We often talk about Achilles as the angry one because his epic begins, "Sing goddess of the rage of Achilles." But Odysseus is so angry so many times in the Odyssey and in the Iliad. And so this man comes home who's his father, who is filled with rage and righteous rage. And basically I sort of saw that moment as like a poisoning, that Odysseus poisons him. And he's 21 years old and he wants to be like his father, and his father has just come home and he does it. And I never wanted that to go away. I wanted him to have to live with that. And ultimately, I think that that is what allows him to take a different path, is that sits so badly with him, this horror, that he has to break from his father and decide, I can't ever live that life that my father lived, because look where it led me. And that basically he sort of feels like he has to spend the rest of his life making up for that. Mm-hmm. So I think in that way, Circe and he have a lot in common, because they both have some horrors in their history that they both feel that they are in debt for. And yeah. So I wanted to, I didn't want to soft pedal it, but I also wanted it to be something that it's like a moment of toxic masculinity poisoning, basically. And it has tremendous consequences for them, but it's something that shapes him to be a better person going forward. So it's complicated.
I was actually rereading that scene last night, and I would recommend for anyone who has already read it to reread this or enjoy it when it comes. But the scene between Telemachus and Circe, when he confesses to her what he did when he hung the women, that was a mic drop moment. And the way you end that graph, and then there's a break before you go into the next scene, was just so, it was beautiful and ruthless the way you wrote it. And so thank you for giving justice and a voice to those women that I feel like when you read the Odyssey, it just, it's Odysseus the hero and not Odysseus the monster.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a question from Tessa. Tessa wants to know, this is for both of you, please tell us one book that we have to read other than your own or each other's. And one book is hard, but is there something recently that has really stuck with you, or something that you've been recommending to friends lately?
Go ahead.
Should I go? Okay.
You're the first.
I'm just looking at my pile of books here. Can I?
Feel free to mention more than one, by the way.
Can I sneak in two?
Yes, go for it. Wow.
I'm going to sneak in two. So here's a novel that came out last year that I loved. It's called The Unpassing. It's by a writer called Chia Lin. And it's this really beautiful novel about a Taiwanese immigrant family in Alaska and the tragedy that they go through and survive. Really beautiful novel. And then the second book that I'll recommend very quickly is called Sabrina and Corina. It's by Kali Fajardo and Steen. It's a collection of short stories, and it's just tremendous short stories about generations of women. Really beautiful book.
Wow, I'm going to read both of those. Thank you. I have been rereading James Baldwin is one of my favorite writers of all time, and I just picked up Giovanni's Room to reread it. And every time I read Giovanni's Room, I feel like I'm blown away all over again. And so Giovanni's Room, if you haven't read it. And I would add, let's see, I think I loved, it's very funny. It's a very different vibe, but I feel like it's one of those books. I always really appreciate books that can marry humor with like real incisiveness, and like, you know, they can sort of, it's like, you know, the punch with one hand and the laugh with the other. So Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed is really great. I don't have it with me, but I particularly, it's set in Philadelphia, and it's tremendous.
Is great. And then we have time for one more. Mary and Madeline have spoken to you about this before, but she wants to know, you know, how many revisions it took to write the Song of Achilles and to write Circe, and your story, especially with Song of Achilles as a writer, gave me so much hope, especially as someone on submission, like to just hang in there with the process. So if you would mind sharing.
Sure. So many revisions. I mean, in almost uncountable. Song of Achilles took me 10 years to write. And that included me sort of at the 5-year point having a full finished draft that I had already written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten, and then throwing that draft out and starting over. So just endless rewriting. And same thing for Circe, that it takes so many edits and so many sort of different times through to feel like I really have found the character's voice. And I've just come to the point where I feel like that's just part of the process. I have finally given myself permission to not see every time I chuck 60 pages or, you know, 400 pages, that is not a failure. That is just, that was a wrong path. And now we're going to go down, now we're going to try a different path. And that I'm learning from all of that. And so for those of you out there writing, yes, editing is part of the process, and it is not shameful to write a bad draft, because you have a draft and now you can work on it and you can make it better and you can develop your thinking and dig deeper and dig deeper and dig deeper. And every time you work on a scene, it's not a sign of I should be done already. It's I'm making this as deep as I can make it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
So inspiring.
Would talk about, I don't even like the term failure, but I wish more writers would talk about the hiccups instead of the successes, because I think it's very easy for people to see like New York Times bestseller and this beautiful, you know, these masterpieces when they're out in the world, and not the years and the blood, sweat, and the tears and the confusion that go into them. So as a writer and for everyone here who's possibly writing their own book, thank you very much for sharing that. I was told to keep this at an hour, and I know I don't want to make Alex mad at me, not at all. So I think I'm going to hand it back over to him, but I just quickly wanted to, before I thank you, amazing humans, there he is. I just wanted to announce for those of you who did the giveaway that my page and Midtown Scholar did for the signed copies of these 2 amazing books, and this really chic Circe t-shirt as well. Drum roll. The winner is Emily Williams. And Emily, we will be contacting you and getting you your goodies soon. So thank you to everyone who joined us. And Megha, Madeline, I would go on for hours if I just had to gush about how lovely you both are. Madeline, it's always so great to see you. And Megha, you are just a ray of sunlight. And I can't wait to speak to you further again. And Alex, you're pretty freaking great too. You know, I just want to give you some love, and thank you to Midtown Scholar for organizing this. These events are just so inspiring, and much thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, KATHRYN. Thank you, Megha. Thank you, Madeline. Congratulations on your books. My goodness, what a time to be releasing your books into the wild right now. To our viewers out there, if you want to purchase a Burning and Circe, here they are. Click the green button below. It's right below all of our faces here, or just head to MidtownScholar.com. We've got books, we've got t-shirts, we've got everything. So click the link, head over there. Again, thank you, KATHRYN. Thank you, Megha. Thank you, Madeline. Thank you to our viewers. And I'm going to give the last word to our amazing authors here. So let's go KATHRYN, Madeline, and then Megha.
Oh,
last word to our audience.
A wrap up? Well,
yeah.
I didn't thank everyone who is here watching this right now. And I just want to say a big thank you not only to these amazing authors and bookstores and independent bookstores, and please, please, please keep supporting your independent bookstores. yeah, Amazon is convenient, but like these are the people who care. These are the people who bleed ink. So support them. If you're looking for a good book club, I run the Inky Phoenix, and it's my heart. I love it so much, and I would love to have your voice there. And to the readers, keep doing it. We need this magic. The world needs stories, and we need something beautiful like this to connect over. So keep reading those books, especially from these guys.
I'll very quickly say thank you to Midtown Scholar and Alex, and thank you to superstars Madeline and KATHRYN for including me in this conversation today. It's been so special. I know I'll remember this for a long time. And thank you to everybody who joined us. I know that, you know, this is a very strange time and lots of people are juggling a million things. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, I echo all of that. Thank you so much, Alex, for running such an incredible independent bookstore and for putting on these amazing events for authors and connecting authors and readers. I totally agree. Support independent bookstores. They need us. We need them. KATHRYN, thank you. You are so gracious. You did that so graciously. I'm in awe. And Megha, this has just been getting to talk with you and getting to read your book has been such a gift and a pleasure. I hope our paths cross many more times. Thank you all for listening. This was really such a treat.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.